Hey everybody, welcome to a very special Awesome Finds. These are my holy grails. That's right, I've been searching for these records for the past 16 years or so, and I finally have them, and I'm very excited to show them to you. First up, I have 3 on the Disneyland Records label. This first one is Pirates of the Caribbean, the soundtrack from the fabulous Disneyland Adventure. Now, Disneyland put out quite a few of these albums that sort of recreate the Disneyland attractions, basically recreating the attraction for your home. And what's really cool about them, not only are they gatefold, but they have a little storybook with these awesome vintage photographs. Of course, they were contemporary at the time, showing you the ride. And what's really cool about this is all pre-Jack Sparrow. So you get an idea of what the ride was like before they went in and changed it. And there's the back right there, 1968. Really cool album to have, and apparently it's kind of pricey. Also from 1968 is Walt Disney's The Enchanted Tiki Room from Disneyland, the original soundtrack of the Tiki Room and the Adventurous Jungle Cruise. So this is like, you know, a shared soundtrack. So on one side it's Tiki Room, the other side is the Jungle Cruise. And again, like the other record, this is a gatefold. Now this one isn't in as good shape. Here you have, again, like I said, not in the best shape, a lot of tape holding it together, but still very cool. See these vintage photographs. It's so neat to see people dressed up going to Disneyland. Now they do something called Dapper Day, which sort of recreates that whole idea of dressing up to go to Disneyland. Love these illustrations. And here we come to the Jungle Cruise, which is really interesting too, because that has changed quite a bit, including the boats. They have gone through a number of changes, so it's cool to see Disneyland before they changed it a lot. And there's the back. So if you know me at all, I am a big Tiki file. I love everything Tiki, and while it's not my favorite Tiki destination, it is so cool to have this soundtrack of the Tiki Room. It's sort of a love-hate, I would say, I have with the Tiki Room. It's an awesome experience. Some of the songs are pretty cheesy, but they're somewhat endearing, and I love the fact that you can eat a Dole Whip while you're on this ride, and I love the rain effects. I would love to recreate something similar in my own home Tiki bar. I think that would be fantastic. Last up from the trio of Disneyland records, I have the story and song from the Haunted Mansion. Oh my goodness, this is one of those albums I have been looking for forever. And whenever I find it, it's incredibly expensive because I believe it was only made in 1969. They didn't really reissue it on vinyl until years later, and that goes for quite a bit of money too. So anyway, the record that you do see a lot is the Haunted House, songs and sound effects for the Haunted House, and it has nothing to do with this. This was a promotional sort of tie-in for the opening of the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland, which was, I believe, 1969. Yeah, that's what the copyright says. And what's interesting about this, it features the Hatbox Ghost. Now, this is a ghost that was long debated. Did he ever exist? Did children simply imagine that he was in the mansion because of this album? But it turns out there is very early film footage of the Hatbox Ghost working in the attic of the Haunted Mansion. Now, they quickly got rid of him because the effect didn't work. The whole idea was that his head would disappear and end up in the box, the Hatbox here. Recently, Disneyland revamped the ride and put him back in there. So anyway, long story short, this is essentially what you hear on the ride, and it kind of gives it this story of these 2 kids, one played by Ron Howard. One thing that's interesting is that I do notice that the recording here is different than the recording you hear on the ride. Now, I don't know if over time they originally used the same recordings, but this is unique to this record, and it's not what you're going to hear when you go to the ride currently. Opening it up, this is a gatefold. Again, this record is not in the best shape in terms of the storybook section, but it's still awesome. I mean, look at these illustrations. I love the look of this. It's just, so cool. And there's the Hatbox Ghost right there. Oh man, I mean, a lot of these you could just frame and hang in your house, you know what I mean? But I'm not gonna take it apart. Maybe I'll photocopy it or something. And obviously this was gently used by a child who did a little scribble here and there. This album is very expensive, even in this kind of condition. Expect to pay anywhere from $35, 40, 45, 50 bucks for this if you can find it. I love Bill Haley and his Comets, and this is one of those records I am so happy to have. It is Rock Around the Clock. Now, technically, this is a compilation. It's got a lot of the big hits: Rock Around the Clock, Shake, Rattle, and Roll, 13 Women, Rock a Beat and Boogie, and it's not in the best condition, but it means more to that because the story behind this album is that I was over at Vacation Vinyl and I'm helping to curate a section over there, and I was going through a ton of records and I found this album and I said, look, Mark, I will buy this off you. I just want this album. And he actually ended up giving it to me because it's not in the best condition, and he knew how much I wanted it, and he figured I put a lot of work into this curated section. So he gave this to me, and that's awesome. And to me, that is worth more than what the condition would say this album is worth. And I think you guys can attest to the same thing. Okay, so now I have Johnny Cash Sings the Songs That Made Him Famous on the Sun Records label. This is one of those albums that I thought was incredibly expensive. I remember the first time I went to Big Al's Record Barn, he had a copy of this and he wanted $200 for it. And I think that's like an old school thing. I mean, before the internet, a lot of these records just went for more money because people thought they were more rare than they actually are. And also, I think it's a generational thing. A lot of the people who grew up with this music are unfortunately dying off, or they're just not interested in buying records. And I see that a lot with Elvis stuff. I mean, his stuff used to go for a lot of money. Granted, there are a few albums that still go for a lot, but by and large, when you go to antique shops, they overcharge for those albums. I'm sure you guys understand what I'm saying. So for a long time, I thought this album was way out of my price range, but it turns out it's really not. It's the album before this. That one goes for quite a bit because I believe that is technically his debut album, whereas this is more of a compilation. It's kind of a best of, but not really, and it was reissued so many times over the years. But still, this is an early pressing. It's not in the best condition, but the cover is almost flawless. Anyway, I love Johnny Cash, and I have a lot of great memories borrowing a copy of this album and learning the songs on here for my own band. It was pretty cool. I love this early music. It's very simple to learn. You can pick it up relatively easy. Up next, we have Santo and Johnny. This, I believe, is their debut album, self-titled release on Canadian American Records, which I had never heard of. And it makes me wonder if this was their first record as well, because the catalog number is CALP 1001. I don't know. You guys can let me know. But Santo and Johnny, their big hit was Sleepwalk, and oh my God, I love that song to death. And to find a copy in near mint condition, I mean, this is the original shrink wrap on this album. Oh man, this is just such a gem to have. Look at their hair. Ah, oh, so cool. Anyway, guys, I encourage you to check them out. At least check out Sleepwalk if you haven't already. Now, a little backstory on these last two records. I remember probably back in 98, 99, around that time, my parents and I went up to San Mateo area and they had this citywide garage sale. And I remember I picked up a lot of albums I still have today. And I went to this one place and this guy didn't really have a lot of records, but he had a lot of CDs. I don't know how we got in the conversation of it, but basically we started talking about Ultra Lounge, because at that time Ultra Lounge was a very popular compilation series put out, I believe, by Capitol. And it kind of tied in with the whole swing revival that was going on. Like Brian Setzer was huge. They had that Gap swing ad. And so naturally, lounge and bachelor pad music was making a big comeback. He caught on that I was into that stuff, and I bought them, but he said, hey man, you should pick up these CDs. It was an alternative compilation series called Music for a Bachelor's Den. And oh my gosh, I picked up two of those. One was Exotica, one was like your basic overarching of the genre sort of CD. I got another like Julie London CD and a Marty Pyach, I'm not sure how you say his name, CD. And those were a huge influence on me because I had no idea that such kind of crazy out there music was made for what I assumed to be very square people back in the 50s and 60s. I didn't realize how amazing some of this music was, and it was like nothing I had ever heard. Each and every one of those songs was so special that I just wanted to listen to the rest of the album that those songs were from, and it kind of set me off on this quest to buy up Exotica from Esquivel, Les Baxter, Martin Denny, Arthur Lyman. Also on that compilation were about 3 songs from 2 artists I'm gonna feature right now. The first one is Dick Hyman. Now, I know he's got a funny name, but man, this guy can play. This album is called The Electric Electrics of Dick Hyman. So this is him going nutso on the Moog synthesizer. And look at this album art. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's copy and pasted all over this fake looking moon background. And on the back here, it's like the opposite, right? So it's like positive, negative, but it's a little different, right? But this is all, I love how this is backwards. Opening it up, you have more of that moonscape, and it just talks about each of the songs. And the main song on here is The Topless Dancers of Corfu. And oh my gosh, is that song out there. When I heard that on the CD, I couldn't believe that was made at this time in the late 60s, but there it is on this album with a bunch of other crazy songs, including the Minotaur, which goes on for like, I wanna say 6 or 7 minutes. What's the time on this guy? Yeah, it goes on for 8.5 minutes. And this album isn't that expensive. I encourage you to check it out because it is nuts. And it's, this is the kind of stuff that it just gets me going, and I'm so happy to have this album. Okay, now we come to the creme de la creme. This is the mad musical world of Mel Henke. I think that's how you say his name. This is La Dulce Henke. And that's not him on the cover, by the way. That is this radio personality, what's his name? Tom Donahue. On that CD, Music for a Bachelor's Den, there were 2 songs on there, The Lively Ones and The Twisters. And those 2 songs blew me away. I had no idea such risque double entendre kind of music was being made back at a very uptight square time. But man, it's a fun album. It's a party album. I highly encourage you guys to at least listen to it, if not pick it up. I mean, if you see it for a great deal, totally pick it up. It is worth having in your collection as a conversation piece at the very least. All right, guys, that will do it for this time around. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to leave a comment down below and let me know what you guys think. I am your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.